Hey, can you hear me?
Hello,
Hey,
how are you?
good.
It's great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Welcome to the desert island. It's great to have you here. I know it's been a rush away from your real life. You're now the new editor of the US edition of Revolution, and I'm sorry that you've been shipwrecked so early in your.
Yeah, well, I have a ship coming in to save the day.
Oh, excellent! Well, then, before the ship lands and rescues you, let's have a conversation about watches. Stephen,
Yeah.
I've got my my secret recipe coconut drink. Did you manage to bring a drink?
I do. Yeah.
Excellent. Tell me.
Yeah. Well, right now it's still pretty early in the morning here, so I've got some Starbucks
Excellent.
in my Yeti cup.
Awesome. Fantastic. So we may be here for some time before the ship comes to rescue you.
Yeah.
I hope you've managed to come up with a list of your perfect desert island watches that you could talk us through. So let's just get straight on with it and talk about watches.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where I'm currently staying, I'm staying with friends. And, back when, the virus was just becoming news in New York, they invited me to come stay, and I happily agreed. It seemed like a great idea at the time. Anyway, a couple months later, I'm still here with a week's worth of clothes. I have no watches. I don't know when I'll be able to get back to the city. I don't have a car here. So it's a very luxurious desert island situation that I found myself in reality.
Excellent. Great.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, the perfect time to talk about dream watches because I don't have any real watches here. I figured, I saw your interviews with Jeff and Eric, and, they've really covered their bases with Rolex and, all of those goodies that everyone loves across the board.
Yeah.
But I thought, I know for me, like I always gravitate towards things that everyone else hates for some reason. I think, one of my early jobs was at Condé Nast, and I worked for a very famous fashion editor, Candy Pratz-Price, and she always, one of the things I always learned from her was sort of to expect the unexpected. So I think, when I'm at the trade shows or, even in stores, I'm always looking for the thing that everyone else is overlooking that might be an important watch that maybe a little bit under the radar, or, the watch snobs are turning their noses up at. And, and I think down the line, watches that will have great importance. So that's where this list came from.
Fantastic, fantastic. So kick us off then with the first watch on your list.
So, last year at SAHH, it was Richard Mile's last year showing there. And I mean, if you were there, you remember the booth was made to look like a candy store. And they released this very controversial bonbon collection. And, I remember I was in a group appointment with a bunch of editors from all different magazines, and people just did not know what to make of it. It really seemed to catch people off guard. It was really shocking to a lot of people, which I found really surprising. Anyway, right up my alley.
Yeah.
I had a freelance job a few years ago where I had to write captions for a store that had Richard Mille watches. So I had to get really into like the mechanics and descriptions. And before that, I never really understood those watches. People either love or hate them, but I felt like after I finished that project, I had such a greater understanding of what the brand was all about and the materials and the workmanship. and the stunning prices. Like, I just had a new appreciation for the brand.
Mm.
And it just, and even to this day, it represents something that, like, it's not for me personally, but I know that person, I know that guy that's out there, and I just love them. I love them. I love everything about them. I also tend to like things that are more contemporary. So
Yeah.
anyway, I love this collection. I love the Bonbon collection. The RM 1601. There's I had pictures of two examples. There's the citron and I believe the fraise, which is strawberries.
Well, here's the citron.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a similar experience to you. I went with Richard Mille to the International Athletics in Qatar at the end of last year, and it was a brand that I had not really had that much involvement in, or actually, to be honest, had that much knowledge about. But certainly, by the time I came back, I had a total respect and understanding and fondness for the brand, because there's so much in that brand and so much going on with it that I think really, if you kind of have a love for the technical aspect of watches, then you're really going to really love what Richard and his team do, because the technical advances, the way the watches are made, the whole thing is really remarkable.
Yeah. And also it plays into the history of watch collecting. The Paul Newman, that everyone, of course, the holy grail of collecting right now, when it was launched, sat in stores, people didn't want it. That's a big indicator. Also, I had another example, but I'm blanking on what it was now. But a watch like this has similar traits where I think, like, 30, 50 years from now, those watches are going to represent a very specific period in time.
Yeah.
I know what it was. So it was kind of like when Cartier became mass, when it went, obviously, I know you spoke to Eric about how, like, Cartier was London, New York, and each one sort of functioned independently. And in the 70s, it was repurchased and became one company globally. And, that was obviously such a huge turning point, obviously for Cartier, but also for the watch industry, because sort of modern marketing came out of that period. And sort of the way we look at watches today is very much based on what had been built at that time. So anyway, these Richard Milles check all of those boxes. The fact that they're controversial, and that sort of those cartoon colors and, the subject matter of the watches, the workmanship, 30 years from now, they are going to look brilliant.
Actually, I think it was the phrase that I shared before. This is the section. Let me just. They are. They're unusual. I can understand it's a watch that you're either going to love or not love. I think there was another one, wasn't there, that was shaped like a marshmallow. We call it. I think the brand name for them in the UK is Flumps. The twisted marshmallows that kids or adults.
Yeah, it's like icing, how it comes out of the the squeeze tube.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In fact, there used to be a game when I was a kid where you used to have to fit as many in your mouth and say a nursery rhyme. I can't remember exactly. And there was a watch that was essentially a flump on the wrist. I remember when I first saw that watch when those watches were unveiled, it just completely blew my mind. But there was something of the genius in it as well. So,
and the fact that I remember there was another editor from another magazine there, and he was just horrified, like visibly upset. And I just thought that was just so great. Amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, and Frank Ocean owns one, and you can't get any cooler than
Well, yeah, absolutely. If it's good enough for Frank,
that.
it's good enough for any of us.
Yeah.
So, the Richard Mille's a controversial choice, maybe, but I'm very glad that that was on your fantasy desert island list.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, that's going to be something that no one else will pick.
Yeah, I would imagine not, but I'm glad that you did. I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the next then. What's your next?
So the next one, the next watch is probably, this is probably my dream watch, and I've come very close on a number of occasions to buying one.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there's always something where I don't have the money, or something always happens and I never can get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, when I first started covering watches, I didn't know the first thing. And it was probably about 20 years ago. And I started going to antiquarian auctions in New York. And, you know, the sort of the watch collecting craze was just starting to bubble up at that time. And I just remember going to the auction room, and there'd be like maybe 6 other people there. The most amazing things coming through. And, you know, just as a, you know, poverty-stricken editor, just like drooling over all of these things that I could buy that I just couldn't afford. Anyway, when I first started attending Baselworld, Bulgari had that separate building, and you'd walk in, you had to go up this big staircase, but at the base of the stairs, they had a little sort of boutique set up for Gerald Genta, which was, you know, owned by Bulgari. And I remember for the first time going there, walking into the booth, and the whole booth is Mickey Mouse watches, and Donald Duck, Goofy, you know, Goofy golfing, Scrooge McDuck. I just couldn't believe it. And sort of a similar thing to the Richard Mille appeal. You know, the prices at the time were high. And you know, and then since then, I kept learning more and more about Gerald Genta and the importance of what he did in the business. I mean, it's like unheard of what he did. You know, like millions, but like all of the top watches that everyone's dying over, all can be traced to him. So here's this series of Mickey Mouse watches, and it was sort of the end of his career. And I don't know how he ended up there, like how he ended up like with this fascination with Disney characters, making character watches, you know, maybe it was like returning to childhood. Anyway, I have loved them. I loved them then. I love them now. And the fact there's that one, which I think is in the picture, you know, it has the, you know, jumping hours, retrograde minutes, which is my favorite complications. And, you know, to combine that with a Mickey Mouse watch, it's just great.
Yeah.
You'd never see them. Back then, like 20 years ago, they would pop up at auction quite often. But now, I mean, you very rarely see them now.
Yeah.
You know.
It is something really quirky about these watches. I mean, here's the guy that, as you rightly pointed out, was responsible. His designs were responsible for some of the biggest hits ever in watchmaking. When we think about, there are the classic watches that are Genta penned, such as the Royal Oak Nautilus, and then out of the kind of, well, out of not even on the field in the stadium, out of far left comes this Mickey Mouse watch. And now the first time that I was aware of these watches, but I remember having a drink with a London-based watch dealer, a great friend of mine, David Duggan, and we were having a drink before we went out for dinner one evening, and he always brought a couple of bits and pieces for me to look at while we had a drink. And this one evening, I'll never forget, he kind of, I said, "What you call David, you must have brought some great stuff again to show me." Normally incredible watches, Patek Complications, you know, vintage Rolex. And I'll never forget this evening, he pulled out, "I've got something a bit different to show you," and pulled out a Mickey Mouse Genta watch. And I was At first, I thought he was kind of kidding me, and then after 15 minutes of chatting about the watch and looking at it, I realised that actually these are serious timepieces.
Yeah,
It's not a novelty. It's a genuinely very important watch in
yeah,
terms of Genta's output.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's so many variations of them.
Mm,
There, I think I mentioned in an email. There's a guy on Instagram, Super Corgi, and I believe he's based in Singapore, collector of only these Disney retro fantasy watches.
yeah,
And
okay.
he posts every day, sometimes multiple times a day.
Mm,
And I mean, they just keep coming, and more like characters that you're like, they made a watch with like, Donald Duck's nephew on it. Like, it's insane. There's like literally a character, there's a watch somewhere. Yeah, there's so many of them out there, and the funny thing is, like, they're impossible to find.
yeah, yeah. Here's
Yeah,
a picture that you sent me of of one with Mickey and one without Mickey.
yeah, yeah. So
And
apparently, I was reading this was from a Christie's auction. On the left, without the Mickey, it was one of the very first, or I guess it's one of Gerald Genta's first, like by retrograde movements with the jumping hours. And then I think they hit the second generation were with the Disney characters with Mickey.
so good, so
Yeah,
good. Really good. Really good story behind those watches as well, I think, and
yeah,
it's testament to such an important watch designer who clearly actually didn't take himself very importantly at all, or too
yeah,
seriously, should I say.
yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, and it's also, I think now, like a very interesting lesson for the industry. You know, last year at SIHH, or now Watches and Wonders, Hermes had a watch designed by an outside designer, this guy, Ini Archibong, and called the Gallop. Beautiful watch. But I thought it was so smart of them to kind of look outside, and find somebody new, bring in a new designer, approach, have it be a design project. And it really, I wonder why big brands, some of the, marquee names that we go to see are not doing the same. Because you look at like Gerald Genta, who bounced around, he did watches for IWC, he created watches for almost every brand. And all of them are huge collector pieces today, still.
Yeah,
And it's the mystery to me why companies are not trying to sort of replicate that formula again and
yeah.
find the Gerald Genta of today.
Mm. Yeah,
You know,
it's a really good point. It is a good point.
we're
Um,
stuck in this kind of obviously secondary market and auction pieces are what's driving the industry now. But so watch brands are kind of, when they bring a new watch back, it's based on a historical piece, and it's so rare that you see something that's contemporary, like fully contemporary, that has very little reference to a watch from the 50s or 60s or earlier. And that's when I see one, I get really excited. And that goes, feeds in back to Richard Mille again. you
yeah,
know
yeah.
they're not referential whatsoever,
No,
which is
they're, they're,
admirable.
they're fun watches as well, aren't they? I
Yeah,
mean, the Genta Mickey Mouse, the Mille watches. It's a watch that is serious, but it's not serious in the same way.
mhm,
So it's yeah, it's very cool. Now you mentioned at the beginning about going into the Bulgari Hall, and
yeah.
that segues nicely into your kind of next choice, which is very much related to these Mickey Mouse watches.
Oh yeah. Well, I remember the first time I met Fabrizio Bonamassa, who's the creative director at Bulgari. We were talking about Genta, and of course, I was telling him my love of these character watches and the jumping hours and retrograde minutes. And every time I would sort of bump into him, we'd kind of continue the conversation. And then last year, I believe it was last year, they had Geneva Days where, you know, they had sort of a little pop-up in a hotel while SIHH was going on. And, you know, sitting at the table looking at the new pieces, and he comes over to the table, kind of like slips up beside me and like drops that platinum Genta in front of me. And I thought it was an old watch. I thought it was like something from their archives. And, you know, lo and behold, it's brand new. On their website. You can click and buy right now. It's, you know,
it's stunning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's everything I love. And it was just such a surprise that they did it. But I guess it was the 50th anniversary of Genta.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling, I think I've read that they're going to start doing more, but, you know, which I hope.
Yeah, it's great. I love the color as well. That blue dial. With the fade to black at the bottom is stunning. Really stunning.
Yeah. And there was a Genta collector, I guess, in the showroom at the time who had some vintage pieces very similar to this. So they had them all lined up together, and you couldn't tell really the new one from the old one, which was great.
That is cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
And nice and understated. Perfect. The perfect pair with the Mickey Mouse for the desert island. You could double wrist. You could represent, but have the kind of more restrained on your left and then Mickey on the right.
Yeah.
The Genta double hit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love how these watches just tie into the history of watchmaking in sort of in the funniest way. You know, these sort of beloved eccentricities, which I love.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
What a fabulous second kind of patch of your choices. So we enter the third and fourth again, like the second and third are linked. So kick us off with your next choice.
Yeah, so I mean, similar in aesthetic would be watches by Alan Silverstein. You know, they're from probably about the same time, that sort of circa 1990, and very much reflective of design, fashion, and architecture of that time period, which I love. You know, I had the fortune to interview Pierre Ranier, I think his name is, Rayner, from Cartier. He's the heritage director for Cartier right now. We were talking about the new asymmetric tank from this year. And the year that watch was brought out was 1936. Depression was still going on. The what's his name? There was a royal abdication. I'm forgetting the exact.
King Edward.
King Edward, abdicated.
Yeah.
Hitler was on the rise. I mean, it was like chaos going on in the world.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know, how the strange parallels of Cartier bringing that watch back this year when very similar things are going on. And I was wondering if like the political climate had any sort of reflection upon the design of the watch, you know, like this off-kilter watch made for an off-kilter time. And he said, actually, they have records where the design of the watch ties back to architecture. So leading me back to Alan Silverstein, you know, there was movements coming out of Italy. There was the Memphis movement where, you know, it was like furniture and buildings and tchotchkes, like everything had this very sort of like new wave punk kind of almost cartoony, like Pee-wee's Playhouse has that kind of look to it. You know, like Leopard and like Technicolor and Flintstones and Jetsons kind of all like mashed together. And his watches definitely have that vibe to them. They also, you know, they just reflect that period of time exactly to me.
Yeah.
You know, the pushers on the sides of the chronograph, or, you know, he worked with like, it was like triangles, circles, and squares, yellow, red, blue.
Yeah.
And it was like a million different configurations of that.
Yes.
And amazing watches, amazing looking, you know, and also like, you know, one of the, you know, very early, like small independent brand that like kind of struck out and, you know, got some traction, you know, away from the big brands that, you know, specialized in a very particular style and type of watch, which we see today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. You sent me a picture.
Yeah.
This is
amazing.
a very, very interesting watch because it's the first Sapphire.
Yeah. I had never seen this before. I just stumbled upon it by accident. It was from a Phillips auction in 2017, owned by an Italian collector. And it was a sale that took place in Hong Kong. Anyway, the watch, let's see, I wrote down, I guess circa 1993. But yeah, the very first sapphire crystal case watch made. It was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, when we started seeing them a couple of years ago, I thought it was a new innovation, but here it is.
Yeah. And it sold for 200,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is about 20,000 quid and about $25,000.
Yeah. 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 There were, and very few, 10 pieces made.
Yeah.
But very reflective of his style, you know, the red and blue strap, the multicolor, the triangles, the circles, and you know, if you just Google images now, like one's wilder than the next.
Yeah.
They're great.
Fascinating again, and the common theme through a lot of these watches that we're talking about is it's not a watch that's taking itself too seriously. It's fun, it's playful. I love the red and blue mismatched straps, opposite sides of the watch to the pushers, which sit against each other. I think it's great, really great, and a technological you know, masterpiece to be the first sapphire case mechanical watch. And a bit like the Genta Mickey Mouse watches, it would be easy to just kind of in a mass of watches kind of pass it off, overlook it as like a novelty watch. It's not. It's a very serious piece of watchmaking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's about the time that like Swatch was coming around. So it could very easily be mistaken for a plastic swatch, you know?
Yeah. Very cool.
But they're great.
And so that's a perfect and neat segue into your final choice.
Yeah. So I guess this is going back now 5 years. I can't remember now exactly. But, you know, MB&F, who collaborate often with different watchmakers, did a piece with Alan Silverstein, and you know, it's just amazing. It's the best of both of, you know, what they do. Really incredible looking.
I'm going to share that.
Yeah.
Here we go.
The LM1 Silverstein.
Yeah. Really cool.
Yeah, you know, using the red, blue, yellow, the circles, you know, the stitching, all of that.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, I really like that. I've got another one here as well, which I think is a really nice angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the kind of the signatures of his are very clear there, aren't they? Red triangle, the use of the red and blue, and the pop of yellow. Yeah, very, very cool.
I love them.
Yeah.
I own one. Apparently, I saw it, you know, they have the pre-owned shop on the MB&F website, and I guess they had one not that long ago.
Right. Okay. Can you remember? I mean, what do these watches sell for?
I think 72,000 when it first came out.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, not inexpensive.
No,
That's for sure.
But again, it's it's a watch with, more history due to the collaborative nature of its design and execution.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, so you can see a common theme
Yeah,
developing here of watches that I love.
yeah. I mean, an absolutely fascinating choice. Thank you so much for sharing those with us.
Yeah,
So we've talked. You've got your Starbucks. I've got my secret recipe
yeah,
coconut drink. We've talked watches. If we're going to just pass the time, though, we might need to have a read as well. So have you
yeah.
chosen a book that you can share with us?
Yeah, I know. I noticed in the other videos that everybody was picking, watch-related books. But I guess probably my favorite book. Um, there was a period I was freelancing a few years ago, and there wasn't that much work, so I needed an activity. So um, living in Brooklyn at the time, there was a hot yoga studio opened up, and one day I just decided I'm just going to go try it. It just seemed, I just couldn't understand why people would do yoga in a hot room. Like, it was just so mysterious to me and unappealing that I had to try it just to see what it was like. Anyway, I went, and then a couple of days later, I went back. Then I went
So
back
you were
again.
hooked.
Then I went back again, and then the studio would do these challenges where it was like if you went like 30 days in a row, like people would do these extreme challenges. Anyway, so I decided to do it. So I went 30 days in a row every day, but then I just kept going. I just didn't stop. So I got really obsessive about yoga. Anyway, I even started a men's yoga clothing line at the time. That's how obsessed I was.
Oh, you went deep.
Yeah, I went deep. So one of the things that I sold on the site was this book by Ram Dass. It's called Be Here Now, right? It's a very strange book. It's like illustrated. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and it's very cryptic, but yet, um, it's sort of, like people are like, oh, I go to yoga and it's like great exercise. But then when you're there, there's this like big spirituality aspect of going. And it's very difficult to sort of connect the dots between the two things. You're like, oh yeah, hot yoga, go for like a great workout. But then, you're sitting there and you're like praying. So you're like, how do these things all kind of come together? Anyway, this book kind of gives you the clues as to like, or at least to me, how it sort of all comes together. And I find it really fascinating. Ram Dass was like an MIT, professor in the 60s, got really into drug culture and, hallucination. And then sort of from there went on a very deep spiritual journey. And he recently passed away, maybe 6 months ago. Anyway, he's living in Hawaii, but one of the most famous, most well-respected yoga philosophers in the world. But he left this very interesting book behind.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just super cool. There's lots of advice, lots of like good adulting tips in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can maybe spend some time on the island decoding some of the cryptic stuff.
Yeah.
And as you know, I always offer some hospitality to my guests. I've got a couple of lobsters on the barbie, but maybe we can sit extra close and you can show me some moves and we can do our own island hot yoga.
Yeah, definitely.
That'd
Yeah,
be
there was
perfect.
a period I came this close to becoming an instructor.
Right. Okay.
Didn't do it.
Well, I'm prepared to be a guinea pig. You can
Yeah.
teach me some of the moves. That'd be brilliant.
I haven't been in a while, but yeah, I could very easily snap right back into it for sure.
Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. But actually, now my real favorite book and like time related is Animal Crossing. Do you know about this?
So this is really funny because I've got 3 children, and they are still completely obsessed with the Roblox game. And I was chatting to Eric Koo before he landed on the desert island here, and he asked me the question. He said, "Oh, by the way, are your kids really into Animal Crossing?" And I hadn't heard of it. Mentioned it to the kids, and they were like, "Oh yeah, Dad, it's brilliant! It's brilliant." But then I gather Eric and his wife are completely obsessed. And somebody else, John Mayer, apparently, has been playing it non-stop during lockdown. So,
well, I mean, it's good for someone that's watch obsessed because the game is real time based, and the game plays in real time, and there's all of these time telling components that are very big parts of the game. So I have an Instagram account where I kind of document sort of new ways of telling time that I come across.
okay.
Anyway, Animal Crossing is sort of my newest obsession of time telling.
Wow.
Somehow, it connects to, God knows where, like some internet database. So it's often the weather in the game is reflective of the weather where you are. The moon phases, in the night sky reflect exactly the moon phase that's going on in the world where you are. And it's just, there's a lot of similarities. It's a fascinating game.
Wow, it sounds fascinating. And so actually, one of the questions I asked Eric about was setting the moon phase on his AP perpetual calendar. So actually, he said he used an app on his phone, the Hodinkee app, but maybe now he can just check it out on Animal Crossing much quicker if he's on Animal Crossing all the time anyway.
Yeah, because there's nothing like, spending, 8 to 10 hours a day on a computer and then following it up with a few more hours on an even tinier screen.
Fabulous. Yeah. Well, it's been great to have you here. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I hope to see you off the island at some point.
Yeah, maybe I'll have a Genta Mickey strapped to my wrist.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
All right.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.